For more than a decade, the University of Rhode Island had a national reputation as one of the most unfriendly campuses for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender students. Those students didn't need the Princeton Review to tell them how hostile the environment had become. They'd been living it as targets of graffiti and homophobic slurs for years.
There were a lot of people who were very cautious and not out as gay people.
Andrew Winters, an openly gay man, was hired by URI in 1995, initially to work in residence education, having spent most of his career as an advocate around diversity issues. He later established a center for GLBT students on the first floor of Adams Residence Hall. But the climate for gays and minorities had gotten so bad that in 2009, the U.S. Justice Department had been called in to take a look. It was an environment that greeted David Dooley when he took over as URI's 11th president in April of 2010. Dooley said one of his transformational goals was to have a campus that values and embraces equity and diversity. Within a year, Andrew Winters found himself out of a job. Dooley, in his only public comment, told a reporter, quote, "Andrew Winters retired, but he was not forced to retire." Winters and others we've interviewed tell a much different story, painting the picture of an administration that wasn't addressing the concerns of the gay community on campus and grew tired of Winters leading the charge for reforms. In June of 2011, Winters signed a 9-page separation agreement that included both a payout and a gag order. In a wide-ranging interview, Winters told us he signed it because he feared being fired and walking away with nothing. He didn't have a contract or union protection. He is speaking publicly for the first time with the Hummel Report because he has tried unsuccessfully to get the Rhode Island Board of Governors to hear details of what he calls a coerced agreement, signed under duress. 4 months after Dooley arrived as president, a group including Winters and his assistant Joe Santiago met at the president's house to outline their concerns. Winters said nothing changed after the meeting, and that fall of 2010, he helped a group of students stage what became an 8-day sit-in at the campus library, which was covered by NBC 10 and other media.
And I know President Dooley was very unhappy with the fact that the university was receiving what he considered to be attention that was negative to the university.
Within months, the university hired a woman named Catherine Fredman as a consultant with the title Interim Vice President for Community, Equity, and Diversity. She reported directly to the president. By then, a whisper campaign had begun about what was commonly known as Andrew's issues. The implication was the students didn't have the same concerns Winters had expressed, both publicly and privately. Students we talked with who were there at the time said just the opposite. At first, Winters said, Fredman, who was gay herself, befriended him.
She said the president and the provost and other people here are trying to keep you out of meetings. They are, frankly, she said that they were going to come after me, but don't you worry, I've got your back.
Andrew's issues were all about basically reporting some of the discrimination and about trying to find solutions and getting people to do something about it.
Joe Santiago had worked with Winters for years and was let go by the university a year after Winters' departure, even though he says he had been promised Winters' job after he was forced out. Santiago had received complimentary emails from both Dooley and Fredman, only later to be shown the door. Santiago has his own appeal pending with the Board of Governors, now under the Board of Education.
There's no doubt in my mind that the reason that Catherine Fredman was there was to make sure that there would be no longer any voice, no longer anyone who could cause, I guess, embarrassment for President Dooley and the university.
Fredman wasted no time honing in on Winters. 2 months after her arrival, Fredman sent Winters a blistering letter of reprimand, saying she had met with many people inside and outside the GLBT community, and everyone had expressed no confidence in him. She said Winters was difficult to work with, divisive, and defensive, but offered no supporting evidence.
She never observed my work. She never came and saw me working with students or saw any of the many presentations that I had done. This letter, I was completely blindsided by this letter.
In fact, Winters had received numerous letters of thanks and congratulations for his work on campus, organizing yearly symposiums. He was even recognized by the URI Foundation. Winters became increasingly worried when Fredman called him while a reporter for the Chronicle of Higher Education was on campus doing a story that painted an unflattering picture of URI's atmosphere for LGBT students.
Miss Fredman called me on the telephone. She told me to evict the photojournalist from campus, tell him to get off campus, go back to whatever motel he was staying in.
Was she aware she was working for a public university?
I believe she was. But she left me with the distinct feeling that I was in deep trouble for having talked with that photojournalist.
It was a front-page article that reached the desks of college and university presidents across the country. We emailed President Dooley directly asking for an interview and his response to Winters' claims. Dooley never responded to us, referring our email to a spokeswoman for the university. She told us Dooley would not do an interview, calling this a, quote, personnel issue. The university paid Fredman $124,000 for 10 months of work. When we asked for a copy of her contract and job description, the spokeswoman told us she only had an appointment letter, which was part of her personnel file and therefore not public. A week after Winters got the reprimand letter, Fredman told him to meet with Anne Marie Coleman, head of human resources for URI.
And Anne Marie Coleman handed me, I gave you that document, handed me an unsigned, undated, not on university letterhead, list of 7 things that they were going to offer me for my immediate retirement. And the stipulation that I not tell anybody was still hanging in the background.
Winters went out on stress leave. He was 62, having health problems, and was concerned that with no job protection, he might be fired and walk away with nothing. And the university knew it.
I went night after night after night without sleep. And the more I looked for help, the more I realized that the avenues of reporting were being shut down. I contacted the University Affirmative Action Office. The director told me to get off campus and get some help.
So he signed the agreement with the university and its board of governors. It gave him a $125,000 payment, $21,000 to help offset health care costs for him and his husband, who was on his health plan, and nearly $27,000 for unused sick and vacation time. Winters readily acknowledges the agreement provides no avenue for appeal, but he wants the Board of Education, which ultimately oversees URI, to know he signed under duress and to entertain reconsideration. He sent a detailed letter to Ray DePasquale, Commissioner for Higher Education at the time. That was 2 years ago. 4 months after the letter, Winters, Santiago, and 4 others met with DePasquale and Lauren Adrian, chairman of the Board of Governors, who is now running for mayor of Providence.
Commissioner DePasquale promised us, he said, now that we know about this, we have an obligation to fix it, to address it.
And what have you heard from him?
Nothing.
DePasquale tells the Hummel report he told them he couldn't do anything and passed it along to Adrian and the Board of Governors.
Lauren Adrian just bailed. He never came back. There was no accountability.
In a phone interview last week, Adrian said he couldn't recall specifics of the meeting and didn't remember receiving an appeal. When we pressed him about the larger issue of a coerced agreement, Adrian ended the conversation. So we went to the current chairwoman of the board, Eva Mancuso, who was handed a packet of information about the case last year by State Representative Frank Ferry. Mancuso declined our request for an on-camera interview. In a follow-up email, she told us she had, quote, no time to bring myself up to speed on this case. Not my priority now. Santiago has also appealed to the Board of Governors, but almost 2 years later still has no resolution. The university says he was not terminated, rather, his limited appointment expired. Catherine Fredman, no longer works for the university.
He was being basically bullied out of URI.
Peter Nightingale has been a URI physics professor for 30 years and is one of half a dozen faculty members who signed a letter to President Dooley, upset over the tone of Fredman's letter of reprimand to Winters.
If President Dooley had wanted to solve this problem at that point, rather than just giving us a standard response, I can't talk about this, he would have said, I cannot talk to you about these matters, except when Andrew is willing to sign a waiver saying that I can discuss this with me.
Why do you think this struck such a nerve with the administration?
Universities in general have become corporations, and anybody who threatens the bottom line has got to go. It's as simple as that. And we throw them under the bus, and it's accepted. Andrew was perceived as being somebody who was bad for the brand, and so he had to be removed.
Dooley has refused to speak with anyone who has approached him about this case, including several lawmakers. So last month, Representative Spencer Dickinson and Frank Ferry filed legislation that would form a special commission to investigate issues of fairness in hiring and retention at URI.
What do you say to the person who say this is just a disgruntled guy who wants to get back at his employer?
Well, you know, I think that's a standard way of trying to disqualify anybody who's speaking up about a problem that needs to be addressed.
Join us next week for a look at URI today. Has the climate for gay students changed? And more on Andrew Winters' departure from the university. In Kingston, Jim Hummel for the Hummel Report.